Fat Dub.
Whenever we can, wherever we can, we're talking hoops. And you know our guys will ramble.
Can you just email me the rest of this story?
This is Just Dubs with John Dickinson.
Dickinson's an underrated talent, 100%.
On KNBR 104.5 and 6.8. Streaming live at knbr.com and on the KNBR app.
The Warriors have traded Jonathan Kuminga and Buddy Hield for a new center, Kristaps Porzingis from the Atlanta Hawks. So after 4+ seasons in the Bay, after being a lottery pick with the Warriors, they have traded away Jonathan Kuminga. His run in Golden State is over.
All right, there you have it. Going back to Wednesday night, and the Jonathan Kuminga era is gone as the Warriors found themselves trying to get Giannis. And what the hell's going on with Giannis? My goodness, he winds up not going anywhere, and now he wants to stay, and he's maybe siphoning his own betting market against. There are all kinds of weird things going on with Giannis. We welcome in everybody to Just Dubs here on this Saturday morning, 2-hour edition post trade deadline, and kind of setting the table here for what remains of the Golden State Warriors schedule. 30 games to go, including a game tonight. They'll play in L.A. Against the Lakers. But Dubs strike out on Giannis as he stays, but then move Jonathan Kuminga for Kristaps Porzingis. There has been a little bit of breaking news even this morning surrounding the Warriors and a couple of potential roster moves. One obvious one, which is the Pat Spencer conversion to a full-time NBA contract. Pat, leading the Warriors to victory the other night in Phoenix, ended up playing his 50th game out of 50. So the Warriors working to get Pat Spencer onto the active roster and available to play for tonight. But the new news, as we bring in Kyle Haar and Raf Corral in the Daly City studios there, is the Warriors interested in Lonzo Ball on the buyout market via Jake Fisher. Lonzo Ball, and so was kind of wondering, hey, the Warriors have this extra spot, right? They had the one spot that was going to be designated for Spencer, and he winds up taking it, and now the Warriors are looking at Lonzo Ball potentially coming in. So as frustrating and disappointing as the way the trade deadline played out, I think, and we'll certainly get into the lack of creativity and unwillingness to act over the last 3 to 5 years that have led to the point where not only do the Warriors miss out on Giannis, but they wind up with their big move being Kristaps Porzingis, and we'll see if Porzingis can stay healthy, and maybe a little bit of Lonzo Ball. We'll see if he can stay healthy. But the Warriors taking some flyers, Kyle, it seems here on the end of the year. A couple of guys who've been pretty injury prone, but can be pretty talented and helpful players if they are healthy and able to be on the court, as the Warriors try to finish the season strong enough, I think, to get into the playoffs. I think it's a new world goals than where things were a couple of weeks ago when it was, hey, can they get somebody that might push them toward being a legitimate contender? Now at 28 and 24 with 30 games to go, it feels like the goal is try to do whatever you can to at least just get into that first round series. And at that point, it obviously is going to be tough no matter who they play. But good morning to you, Kyle.
Yeah. Good morning to you, JD. Good morning to Raph. And actually, JD, I was at Moscone Center yesterday, not at Radio Row, but at the little Super Bowl fan experience, and that was cool. Got a picture with Debo and got a bunch of little trinkets that they were giving away. So that was fun. But yeah, Lonzo, I think definitely injury prone, but he is a guy who's a tall guard and can defend pretty well and can knock down a couple of 3-pointers despite his weird shooting form. And then you talk about a guy like Porzingis who schematically fits, but again, like Lonzo, it's, well, how many games in these last 30 is he going to give you? If it's, I think if I were to put an over under on it, I would say like 15.
Yeah, and we'll see how that all shakes out. But I do think a player, they're looking at their weaknesses. I think, and again, I think the bigger story here is missing out on Giannis. Did they get enough for Kuminga? How did we get to this point where they wind up trading Kuminga for Porzingis? How does it set the Warriors up in the summer? Like we'll get into all of that. But also 808 KNBR, the number 415-808-5627. That is a number to give us a call or shoot us a text. The Golden State Lumber and Showroom text line is open. Again, the same number, 415-808-5627. And, of course, the best YouTube chat in sports, the Dubs OT, Just Dubs YouTube chat with folks filing in here. Long day of Dubs coverage on the leader. We got you for the next 2 hours here on this Saturday, and we're going to need it today to kind of break down and get into everything. Post trade deadline and just kind of where the Warriors go from here. But we always want to keep this show as interactive as possible. And we like to do that here by handing out the phone number and getting into the YouTube chat a little bit. So does Lonzo Ball do anything for you is another question that could be on the board. And oh, by the way, the Warriors did get a win without Steph. No Steph tonight. And the Warriors not rushing Steph Curry back from this runner's knee deal. I wonder, I know I've heard and it has been reported that Porzingis potentially could play here before the All-Star break. I'm starting to wonder if Steph's going to play here before the All-Star break. Already ruled out for tonight. And then the game on Monday against Memphis, the game on Wednesday against San Antonio before the All-Star break. And then it's, another week. I mean, in essence, you give Steph those 2 games. And given the way the Warriors have handled business with injuries in the past, I mean, it's kind of hit me. I thought he would have been back already, to be honest. If not Tuesday, it was kind of a surprise that he didn't play against Philly and then not in Phoenix, not going to play tonight. At some point it becomes, well, what doesn't it just make more sense as much as everybody wants to watch Steph and the Warriors certainly aren't going to be favored against anybody without Steph. Does the prudent thing to do become to just kind of rest him until after the break? And if you're going to do that with Steph, would you do that also with Porzingis, who again is pretty close to being able to play, and then you just come out of the chute against Boston in a couple of weeks at Chase Center and just kind of go from there? The only issue with that is you might lose the next 3 games but I think the Warriors, Kyle, are probably a little bit less concerned about that, considering the trade deadline moves and the Jimmy Butler injury. Obviously, Jimmy remains on the team. I think the Warriors know what their ceiling is for the remainder of this season. I think they can also do the math on the standings and see that they'd have to be really bad to miss the top 10, like really, really bad to miss the top 10, like 10 and 20 level bad to even put themselves in a conversation. And there are some teams in that mix and or already beneath them in the standings that are basically truly tapped out, like the Clippers, obviously with the trading Zubats, and we'll get to Zubats. People want to talk about that in the chat as some of the missed opportunities. And you look at Memphis as another team that the Warriors are going to see. So that's a potential for a win on Monday at Chase. Memphis tearing it down to the studs. And that's another team that the Warriors potentially could have, and it was reported, had interest in, looking to maybe acquire Jaren Jackson Jr. And I think that's the one, as we talked about on Dubs OT, as we start to parse through all of this, that's going to be the one I think that is going to sting the most for the Warriors. The fact that they were so in on Giannis that they got passed for an opportunity, which seems like it was realistically possible to get somebody like a Jaren Jackson Jr. who would have helped this team this year and is young enough to where you feel good about him, being it's not a 32-year-old guy. It's not a 35-year-old guy, right? This is a guy that's still young enough to where you think he's got some prime and ability to improve remaining in his game. And so it kind of would have been the best of all worlds. Give this team a boost to get back with Steph into the playoffs and see what happens. but also feel like you've added a legitimate future piece to the equation that you would bring back next year with Steph and eventually Jimmy. I think the question now becomes, are the Warriors truly committed through the summer to hanging on to Jimmy Butler, even injured, and he is going to undergo the surgery, I think, on Monday for the ACL. And so that's basically about a year from that point. So we're talking, All-Star break or right around All-Star break, I would say, as a guideline, maybe a little bit earlier for Jimmy's return, this time in 2027. So the question, I think, as we move it forward a little bit, will also be, do they look to hang on to Jimmy? Point being, if you are going to hang on to Jimmy and wait for him to come back, you need to build a team that's good enough to where they've already got major action, and then you're dropping Jimmy Butler on it for the last 2 months. And then that can get you back to that point where you feel like you're where you were last year going into the playoffs, only maybe a little bit better and more able to make an even more legitimate run than the Warriors were able to make last year, Kyle.
Yeah, I want to go back to the Jaren Jackson Jr. thing, because I think in my opinion, I think the Warriors might have been a little stumped because I don't think they would have had the Jazz as a destination that would trade for a guy like Jaren Jackson Jr. A team that's still
and today to be able to play, and they need him to play because Steph's going to be out. And he was one of their best players on the floor on Thursday night in Phoenix. So you got to get the Pat Spencer deal done, but they cleared multiple roster spots with the TJD trade as well. They were able to clear a couple of different roster spots. So that opens the door now to be able to add somebody else. And I was kind of wondering, would they look to add somebody else, or would it be a scenario where they would wait until they absolutely had to sign somebody to look to do it? And it looks like they're not going to do that. It looks like they are going to try to roll through. Okay, we're good on the sound in the YouTube chat. I know I was clicking around because I was hearing a little bit of an echo. So I just want to make sure we're good. We got that squared away.
Yeah, we are good. We are good. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
good.
I think I don't know if I accidentally clicked on Raf's mic there, but I think it was on mute for just a second there.
Got it. And that okay. That makes sense. I think I did that because I was clicking around because I was hearing an echo, and I ended up cleaning up the echo it was in a different spot. So we move forward here. Let's get a couple of clicks here, Kyle's clicks. We'll come back. We'll take a timeout. We'll reset everything here to get things rolling for the 2-hour Just Dubs extravaganza. Rip Cougar, JD, should the Warriors have made an effort to trade for Zubats? I know this was an unpopular opinion. I don't think the Warriors could have beat Indiana's package for Zubats. And I mean, Mathurin is, in my opinion, a better prospect than Kuminga. Like, I don't think there's much doubt about that. I know a few people pushed back when I said that on social media. And then you've got Indiana sending out a pick with some protection, but it's basically this year's first round pick for Indiana, which it is protected if it's, I think, in the top 4, and then it converts later if it's, if Indiana's too good and the pick becomes too bad, then it becomes a pick that the Clippers would get later. The Warriors don't have any of that. Like, the Warriors don't have that level of pick for this year, and I don't think the Warriors were looking to include three picks to kind of beat that offer in addition to Kuminga. But again, Mathurin's a better prospect than Kuminga. The Indiana pick is better. So right there alone, I feel like the Warriors would have had to, I mean, we're talking minimum. I think they probably would have needed to do like 3 picks. And I think that's the conundrum, as it turns out, and we can debate, the level at which they were in on Jaren Jackson Jr. But if you go by what Ramona Shelburne had said, the Warriors were talking about, a couple of players, couple of picks. And then when they turned their attention to Giannis, the price went up, and Utah swooped in, and Utah ended up, it was 3 first-round picks for Jaren Jackson Jr. And I don't know that the Warriors ultimately would have done that, because I think the Warriors look at the value chart, and here's the lead into the next part of the conversation. The Warriors can look at the value chart as it relates to these picks, and well, wait a minute, it's 4 picks in a swap for Giannis, but now it's 3 picks for Jaren, and for Jaren Jackson, and it's maybe 3 picks for Zubats if it's going to be the war. And it's like, I think they look at that and go, well, how does that equate? If it's 4 picks in a swap for Giannis, but it's 3 picks, like, it just doesn't, the math on it doesn't add up. The question though is, should the Warriors throw the math away and say, hey, we got to go all in, and we got to pay maybe the exorbitant price, because it's about looking to go add, to the end here of Steph Curry's run. The issue I have with Jaren Jackson is not that it became 3 picks. The issue that I have is if the Warriors had been a little bit more locked in on potentially getting Jaren Jackson, they might have been able to do it before it got to the point where it was 3 picks, right? Like, it does, like that. And so that, to me, it's more the attention to detail and being able to maneuver multiple different scenarios at once. And look, the Warriors get credit for being able to do it last year, where they pivoted from KD when KD didn't want to come to Jimmy. But again, Jimmy kind of fell in their lap because of the fact that he had played his way out of Miami and played his way into basically not being valuable in terms of what you were going to have to give up. 1 pick and Wiggins basically was, and the other players that needed to go to salary match that got sent out. I mean, the Warriors that was a pretty massive trade in terms of everybody that went out, but it was mainly Wiggins as the primary salary filler and the first round pick from last year, because the Warriors believe that they were going to be good enough to where that pick is not going to matter to them. So, all right, let's do a couple of more here, and then we'll take our first time out. 808 KNBR, Bennett Roth. Go ahead and get Lonzo. He's been healthier than Seth. Well, you know what? I think my first thought when there were a couple, and I've mentioned a couple already, but my first thought on Lonzo, Kyle, was they're trying to find somebody that's going to play some of the Podziemski minutes. They're trying to find somebody that's going to and it's almost a short term. To me, that's because, Lonzo, think about it. And Lonzo's much more of a point guard than Brandon is, but Lonzo, when he's healthy, he rebounds, he passes the ball, he gets out in transition and leads the break.
Yeah.
He's kind of a jack of all trades and so, who is the jack of all trades on the Warriors roster in terms of the guy that, doesn't score a ton, but he's rebounding a lot and he's doing, obviously Draymond's in a different position, but Podziemski's kind of been that guy. I mean, to me, this is a statement of, they are gonna go for it in the sense, and again, Lonzo's got to be healthy. So if he's not healthy, it doesn't matter. It's the same thing with Porzingis. But if Lonzo's going to be able to come in and help, I do think he would be somebody that probably will take some of Podziemski's minutes.
Yeah, and as Gene puts out here, yeah, he's a willing passer that can guard, and yeah, I think a bigger, more athletic Brandon Podziemski and JD did because I know Podziemski he came out of the last game like super early, and I think it was an illness, right, and then came back in. I just want to get some clarification on that.
Yeah, he was ill, and I think that led to some poor play. But again, I mean, I don't think anybody really wants to hear excuses being made for Podziemski, who unfortunately has just been unable. He really was working himself back into being a really capable player in the Steph Jimmy world, and we saw him able to do that last year down the stretch in the season, and it really helped the Warriors go 23-8. Got off to a brutal start to begin this year again. He got off to a brutal start last year, but he was coming into his own as that complementary extra player. The problem is anytime you ask him to need to do more, anytime there's all right, step your game up, the old level up, because guys he just has never throughout his career been a level up guy. He just is the guy that he is, and is much less effective with lesser players around him. And so I don't think anybody's really going to be, again, looking at him as if it's, he should be getting all these chances, over and over and over, but still a young player that needs to grow. I before you jump in, Kyle, I do want to, Gene mentioned the rule, the cap rule, and I'm looking at what Lonzo made. I don't think the Warriors can't sign anybody in the buyout market that was making more than 14 million before they were bought out. And Lonzo wasn't. Lonzo was only making 10. He signed a 2-year, $10 million contract.
10, yeah.
Yeah, so he was only making, so 10 is under the 14. So they don't, Lonzo is somebody, Gene, that they would have the ability to sign with the current contract. So it looks like they're obviously going to do that. But yeah, so Lonzo's somebody that I think makes a lot of sense. And again, I think the Warriors, what they're doing here is trying to take some flyers on some guys who have had some health issues to see if they can get them in and keep them healthy. And if they keep them healthy, it's buy low. And I think the intent would be, if Lonzo Ball can help down the stretch here, maybe you bring him back, because I believe he was under contract for next year. So if he winds up bought out, he had money on the books for next year, I thought. And so that meaning he would be a minimum player for next year. So you're kind of lining up your minimum players. And I think they're doing this with Porzingis. They're lining up Porzingis early here to try to help him this year. If he performs well and stays healthy, they can bring him back and then look to, is he going to be a minimum player? If he is so good that he gets a bigger deal, you can put him in a trade. A sign and trade, although there's limitations that come with sign and trade. So I do think they're trying to, everybody hates it, keep their options open. But one negative aspect of the Kuminga deal is that salary slot is gone now. Like that 22.5 that was going to go up a little bit, I think to a little bit south of 25. It had the Warriors kept him and just looked to trade him in the summer. It is a little bit more tricky in terms of some of the salary matching if they look to make deals, unless they're going to be willing to look to trade Draymond or potentially look to include Jimmy in a deal, which they've been reportedly reluctant to do to this point. Quick thought, Kyle, then we'll take a timeout.
Yeah. I was going to say, well, two things. Going back to Pods, I don't think it's a coincidence that once Jimmy came out that his play dipped. JD, like you mentioned, his play elevates when there's talent around him, and he's that connector. All right, that's on Pods. And then on the Porzingis, quick thought about the trade. Since he is on an expiring, and I think he makes north of 30 mil. I mean, if it's a low risk move, because let's say he only gives you 10 games this season and doesn't prove a whole lot in those 10 games. Well, one, you might be able to sign him to close to a vet min contract. And two, if you want to let him walk, you can let him walk and free up. And then you free up 30 mil on your books as well to sign another player or another set of players.
Yeah, and that's how you wind up, rolling with that. So yeah, you look at it, and Lonzo Ball becomes somebody that the Warriors are going to want to bring in. I guess he had a non-guaranteed year next year, so he basically is a free agent. So it was a year that could have been guaranteed that obviously wouldn't be guaranteed at the point in which he gets bought out. So he would be a free agent coming up at that point this year when you look at it. And appreciate No Cap for the nod on that. No Cap was ahead of us on that as I was kind of looking it up and double checking it. So we appreciate that. All right, let's take a timeout. 808 KMBR. We'll get more into the chat, but we'll also come back and we'll just kind of reset everything. The disappointment of missing out on Giannis, the frustration after other potential opportunities went by the wayside. We'll get into all of that coming up next. And then the good and the bad of Kristaps Porzingis, all of that. What does it leave the Warriors for the summer? But we want to hear from you as well. 808 KNBR, 415-808-5627. It is just Dubs here, beginning a lengthy day of Warriors coverage right here on the Sports Leader.
KNBR, the Sports Leader.
The Warriors' pursuit of Giannis Antetokounmpo after a week is over. They have moved on clearly with these moves, but my understanding is the Warriors made a pick-heavy offer last week, continued to have conversations going into this week with the Bucks, but they came to the belief over the last 24 hours, the Warriors did, that the Bucks were not going to be moving their two-time MVP at this trade deadline.
This is KNBR, and this is Just Dubs with John Dickinson, streaming live on YouTube at KNBR 1045.
All right, Warriors strike out on Giannis, who ends up not moving, but I think the bigger story is the fact that the Warriors struck out on a bunch of other potential options. They wind up with Kristaps Porzingis. The Jonathan Kuminga era is over in the Bay as he goes to Atlanta. Buddy Hield on the move as well. Trace Jackson-Davis to Toronto. And a little bit of news from this morning as the Warriors set to convert Pat Spencer to a full roster spot. He's used up his limit of 50 games played with Golden State, so expect that to be done here before the Warriors get on the court tonight down in Los Angeles. And of course, we'll have Dubs OT for you here on the Sports Leader right around 8 o'clock after that game goes final from Crypto.com Arena. But Jake Fisher and Mark Stein reporting, and it was Jake Fisher this morning, that the Warriors have their sights set on adding Lonzo Ball via the buyout market. Mark Stein adding that a source has told him that Ball is expected to land in the Western Conference via the buyout market. So we'll see if that winds up being the Warriors here as we head toward the game tonight, and then Monday, and then Wednesday, and then everybody going to get a little break here for All-Star, and Golden State coming back to play out what will be 27 games at that point, basically a third of the season to be played. And health is the number one thing when you look at what the Warriors got in Porzingis and potentially in Lonzo Ball, and also with needing to hope that Steph Curry can obviously come back here pretty soon for this team to push toward trying to get what I think is the new goal, which is the ability to just get into the playoffs and play, one round. But that being said, the frustration, I think, Give me your first thought, Kyle, on Porzingis. I'll give you mine real quick. But my first thought was, oh, are they doing this because they're going to reroute him somewhere? Like that, my first thought was, oh, Porzingis is hurt and hasn't played in a month, and he's got a big contract. So maybe the Warriors are just condensing the Kuminga money and getting off the Buddy Hield money into one player, and now they're going to look to include him as part of a bigger deal. Basically, the setup to a bigger deal, finding a home for Kuminga while getting a contract that maybe was going to be more appealing as a true expiring and a greater number of expiring than Kuminga alone, because obviously Buddy had to be thrown in there. But my initial thought on Porzingis was there has to be more to this. And then very quickly we learned there wasn't more to it, and that they want the player and they think he can get back to 2-3 years ago form and be somebody that, again, potentially helps him between now and the end of this season. But I also think you don't make the move if you're not looking to bring him back for next year on a less expensive contract than the $30 million, a little under, I guess, closer to $31 million contract for this year. Or you look to sign and trade him. But no, they do not. And I know people are throwing it around in the chat. They do not have a $30 million slot for Porzingis, but he is somebody that can be signed and traded and can be put together with other contracts to be signed and traded in the offseason, should the Warriors ultimately go that route to try and acquire another player. I'm done hearing about Giannis, by the way. I'm done hearing about, like, the Giannis thing needs to be done. And that is the other thought going back to Wednesday and then Thursday afternoon, is the fact that the Giannis thing, just the best scenario, obviously, for the Warriors would have been the Bucks willing to trade him and the Warriors somehow get him because Giannis maybe steers his way there. But the next best thing, in my opinion, would have been Giannis actually going to Miami or Minnesota, because then the Warriors would completely know that they're out and just forget about the pipe dream of start focusing on other stuff. Like, especially if you truly are willing to keep Jimmy and want to keep Jimmy to have him come back and be able to play next year. If you're really willing to do that, then go use some of the draft capital on somebody else that can come in and help you. So those were kind of the two initial thoughts, interrelated. And then we'll get into some of the bigger picture frustration about the Kuminga era, two timelines being a failure, and just, how the last 3 or 4 years really set up what I think many believe, no disrespect to Porzingis, was a whiff at the trade deadline, at least a whiff until proven otherwise, if Porzingis can come in and really help this team and get back to form.
No, yeah, JD, I was right in line with what you were thinking, because I was like, well, if Kuminga, if no one really truly wants Kuminga and values him highly or at all, I was like, well, then a $30 million expiring contract could be appealing, packaged with, some first round picks, and then maybe like a Draymond. But then then we heard Mark Spears, he came on ESPN and said, well, the Warriors aren't done. And I guess, they did make one more move, and that was TJD for a second round pick. But then once they were like, okay, yeah, we're going to hold on to Porzingis, I was like, oh, well, are they trying to just tank? I was like, well, because now you have an injured
and they're not doing that, right? They're not doing that
team
now either.
Yeah, right. So no, I was confused, but originally I thought he was going to get rerouted, and I was like, when was the last time Porzingis even played? And what, it was like early January, right?
Yeah, January.
JD? Yeah,
January 7th, and he had missed some time even before that and come back, and then went out on January 7th. So I was surprised that, initially, and then it's like, okay, well, this is the move. And again, no disrespect to Porzingis, and we'll get to the phones here coming up in just a second. No disrespect to Porzingis, but man, I mean, for the Warriors to miss on Giannis, okay, that wasn't really happening anyway. Not be adept enough to be able to pivot to get into the Jaren Jackson Jr. sweepstakes or even the Zubats sweepstakes, although I don't think they were going to have the ability to get Zubats away given the package that Indiana sent. You know, they weren't interested in Anthony Davis. They weren't interested in maybe engaging the Pelicans on Zion. Again, not necessarily to keep Zion for the remainder of his contract, but to try to rehab Zion and maybe he can become a player for you, or he can be somebody that could be potentially traded at some point down the line. So I think there was or go back and engage the Pelicans on Trey Murphy III. Go back and engage Brooklyn on Michael Porter Jr. It's just the miss out on a bunch of these different opportunities to bring back somebody that is on paper, I think, underwhelming because of the injury history, and say, all right, the goal now is not going to tank, which I agree with, but also fully understanding that there's no shot at contention for 26. And again, you can say, well, JD, there wasn't a shot at contention anyway, as far as the title, but even as far as getting to that level that the Warriors were able to get to a year ago, in the second round of the playoffs with a shot to really believe, had they been able to stay healthy, that they could get to the conference finals and maybe put a scare into Oklahoma City before the Thunder go on to the finals and they won their first championship. To not have that even be on the table, but to not even really see that the Warriors, after hanging on to the picks for so long and hanging on to the young players for so long, Kuminga in particular, as it wasn't working out, it just... They waited too long on all of it, and they got burned. And now they're in a position where they have to make something happen with that draft capital this offseason and the remaining contracts that they have left to truly go in for, the true last shot. Like, if you're keeping Jimmy, and Steph's going to be on the last year of his deal. Like, it truly is. We'll see if Steve Kerr comes back, although I do think Steve is more likely to come back now with Kuminga gone. I've mentioned that, but isn't still a done deal at this point. So I get the frustration of Warrior fans from the way from Joe Lacob on down, and I do think this is a Joe Lacob issue because he's the one that it's like big move or nothing. Right. It's KD or Giannis. It's the massive move or nothing, when the reality is the Warriors have made a bunch of smaller moves over the years that have turned out really, really strongly for them in terms of some of the guys that they've been able to add. The Wiggins deal. I mean, hell, going and getting D'Angelo Russell, even though nobody thought D'Angelo Russell was going to be a long-term play for Golden State, but they signed him to this max deal to be able to scour the league and send him somewhere. They find a guy in Wiggins who'd been a disappointment. They bring him in. Like, the Warriors have made in the past some of these other, more creative type moves, but it's in the distant past now. And so as the players that the Warriors chose to keep didn't develop, because that's the other part of it. And I know that can become its own conversation as to, well, why do these guys didn't develop? But it's drafting a guy in Kuminga that just wasn't the right fit. And they took a flyer on the ability to have him have a higher ceiling than, say, a Trey Murphy, or have him have a higher ceiling than a Franz Wagner who went immediately after him. They took the massive swing on the guy with the major upside, and the guys that didn't have the upside now wind up being the players that are closer to being, star or all-star caliber players in comparison to JK. So, it's maddening. And then you look up and the Warriors still have all their picks. They still have all their picks. And so for what? For post-Steph, for one more run kind of cobbled together with Porzingis and Lonzo Ball, it's really frustrating. I think and again, the Jimmy Butler injury happened. It's a fact. It obviously changed the game. Who knows what the Warriors would have done? Maybe they wind up with Jaren Jackson Jr. if Jimmy doesn't get hurt. But the problem is they are more willing to make those moves for a team that they believe is like already a contender than they are to make those moves to go from, say, somebody that's a play-in or a first-round and out team to be a top 6 team. Like, how about you just work on trying to get into the top 6 and then assess where you are and look to make other moves there. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that, but it starts at the top. And I know the blame game, is it on this on Steve? Is that on Dunleavy? The reality is it's Joe Lacob. It's Joe Lacob that is the one that is, at the forefront of always going after the big thing at the expense of looking at a lot of the littler things, overvaluing the young players and the Warriors picks to a point where the rest of the league tells you it ain't worth as much as you think it is, buddy. And then it leads to this paralyzing inaction, which I think is just it's frustrated Warrior fans beyond belief, because I think what they want is Steph to have a shot, and there is no guarantee that he's going to get a 5th. He probably isn't. He's less likely to get a 5th now than he was 2 weeks ago, for sure. But that's, to me, where the frustration lies. Kyle, quick thought, and we'll get to the phones.
Yeah, my frustration would be that, like, just how many seasons it's felt like they've delayed and delayed and delayed, to now they're put in a position where you're closing in on the end of the Steph era, right? And you could have made a move 2-3 seasons ago to get better, but they've kind of pushed, and they still have all their draft picks, and they failed to make that big move or even get creative and get a younger guy who's in his prime who wouldn't cost as much as that big name player. But now you're in a position where this offseason they have to do something. And if they continue to delay and delay and delay, they're going to look at themselves and then the team is going to be super flawed and just older and just not as talented anymore. So I think that's where my frustration is that they've kind of pushed this thing and have continued to push this thing down.
Yeah, and no cap. JD, the plan has to be Joe not doing anything, even in the offseason, and he's probably going to re-sign Steph and use cap space in 27. Probably going to let Jimmy and Draymond all expire. I mean, that is one option, but I can't imagine. That also means you're going to play out one more year without having any hope. Because if you don't make another move, then you're not going to have that player that you need, even if Jimmy were going to come back and be the best version of Jimmy. So I don't think that that's certainly not the goal. I'm not saying it can't wind up that way, depending upon how things play out. But I definitely don't think, no cap, that's what the plan is. And Diggum chiming in here. I'm going to put that one up too. They are showing you that they are pivoting past the Curry era. That's why they aren't bringing any money back. I don't think that's it. I really don't, Diggum. I don't, and no cap. I don't think it's pivoting past. I think it's having the option to pivot past if they strike out again in the offseason. I just, how can they look Steph in the face and run it back again next year from the beginning without feeling like they had a shot? Because at least at the beginning, they felt like they had a shot. At the beginning of the year, they thought they could be a second-round team, top 4 to 6 seed, and if they're playing well and they make an addition at the deadline, you'll get to a conference finals, and then you're one step away from a finals, and you never know. To go into 26, 27 in the fall with the intent that that's what it should be, with no shot. Like, I just don't. I'm not buying it. I'm not buying it. But you know what? Their inaction has showed everybody that that they can't necessarily be believed in at this point to be, because we keep talking about what they can do and what they want to do and what they should do over and over. But the reality is they wind up doing nothing when push comes to shove, or making these marginal moves like Porzingis and potentially Lonzo Ball, which I don't think is a net negative, because you do need some players to push this group forward and try to win some games. They weren't going to tank, which again, they're probably too good to tank anyway at 28 and 24. Like you lose every game, you're going to be 10th pick. I mean, you lose every game now. There's so many bad teams. So we'll see how it all shakes out. But I understand any Warrior fan that's frustrated or has a lack of confidence in the ability of the Warrior front office to get the big move done, be a closer when it doesn't necessarily fall in their lap, or look to go down a notch in terms of the guys that you're looking for, but look to pay more of a premium for maybe that second tier. And that's the part where I think it gets frustrating, but I think this is the part where Warrior fans would prefer pay the top tier price in terms of what you give up for the second tier player, and just go about it that way, as opposed to believing that you have to pay the top tier price only to get the top tier player. And if you can't do that, then it's just going to lead to do nothing. And that's the part that I think is got everybody just feeling some kind of way about it. Irwin Kwong, obviously Lacob held his cards too long, and the league saw he only had a middle pair. Yeah, well said, Irwin. Well said. All right, let's get to the phones. 808 KMBR. Real quickly, let's get Bleacher Dave up next here on Just Dubs on the Sports Leader. What's going on, Bleacher?
JD, what's happening, brother?
I'm doing well, my man. Good to hear from you.
Man, look, there's nobody I wanted to talk to more about this than you, because, you were on the beat, you were inside, you traveled with teams, all that stuff. But you are way hipper and cooler than I knew. You out here talking about no cap. I'm like, what does that mean? That's something the kids say. Right on, JD. Hey, look, we're suffering from the disease of being light years ahead, right? And so Joe Lacob is a way savvier business guy than you and I and everybody in the room. But I think what he forgot is Larry Riley drafted Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. And somehow he thought he did that. He built the stadium. He did all these wonderful things. He's a great businessman, but what he's not is a experienced basketball operations executive. And from all accounts, his interference in deciding to draft Kuminga is kind of the root, not Kuminga, Weissman is the root for this. You can't miss on a second draft pick and not pay a generational tax and price for that for your franchise. It's inescapable. And everything else you guys have said is right on point. This paralysis by analysis, it's too late. It's too late to undo this. We're cooked. And so I think what we have to do now is begin to pivot and think about what needs to happen with this franchise. This is broken in so many ways. They took too long with Klay. They took too long with draining in Draymond. They took way too long pussyfooting and being indecisive about Kuminga. They missed out on Triple J for a fantasy for Giannis that was never going to happen. We spent way too much time talking about trying to acquire marketing a couple years ago. That was never going to – they don't have the assets to do this kind of stuff. So I think, we got to have to kind of face the future and realize we're not immune from having to rebuild. I watched all 40 years between Western Conference Finals. Let's hope it's not 40 years again. But if this franchise can't look inward and digest the fact that people like Pascal Siakam says, I don't want to come there. I'd rather play with Hallie. Giannis, the rumor was he wasn't thrilled about coming here either. They got to, despite treating all the players great, spending all kinds of money, for some reason, this is just not the attractive place it was when KD came. And of course, they're not a dynasty anymore. I think it's been wonderful, man. I'm so grateful to have lived through this era and all of these things. Yeah. And I still, when Steph Curry's playing, get to see him go play in San Francisco every night. It's a wonderful time to be a Warriors fan, man. But now we get to be like everybody else and moan and complain and deal with our problems and kind of go through these things together. So appreciate you for being here for being here on this stuff before and being here for this stuff now. Be well, y'all.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you, Bleacher. And look, the Warriors are not a destination. That's just the reality. And I said it on the show Thursday. I think Joe Lacob thought, he was going to be the guy that, hey, we're going to draft and develop our own players that other teams are going to want, and we're going to take your players that you draft and develop, a la KD after his time in OKC, like the Lakers. And they did do it with KD, but I think the way the KD thing ended made it where other stars weren't necessarily going to want to come be the number 2 to Steph, or it created a weird energy. And it's not Steph's fault, because Steph was completely selfless and welcoming to KD and allowed him to basically elevate himself to the number 1 player on the team, even though it didn't have to be that way. But it was the way that KD would be able to succeed. So I just think the other part of the problem is the Warriors keep believing that they are this destination. And I think the league is also telling them that they really are not this destination. And I don't think Jimmy counts, because, and yes, Jimmy's come in and been deferential to Steph and been the perfect complementary number 2 type player, but Jimmy didn't have options. Jimmy ran himself out of Miami and didn't have options. And so he was kind of forced to come in and just go with the flow and understand at his age that this is Steph's town and Steph's team and Steph's world. I'm going to get him where I fit in. He by nature is an alpha in terms of his competitiveness, but he's not necessarily an alpha in terms of the style of play. And he's cool shooting it less, as we've seen, and not needing to be, somebody that's going to be this massive, offensive engine in terms of scoring. Like, he'll do it by passing, and he'll do it by rebounding. He'll do it by training. Like, it just in such a complimentary way that it was never going to step on Steph's toes. And other stars are not like that necessarily. So let's pause the conversation here. 808 KNBR 415-808-5627. We'll come back, more chats. It is a 2-hour edition of Just Dubs, as we are off and rolling here on this Saturday on the Sports Leader.
KNBR, the Sports Leader. live from downtown.
Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang!
This is Just Dubs with John Dickinson on the Sports Leader, streaming live at knbr.com and on the KNBR app.
All right, hour number 2 as we roll on here, Just Dubs until noon. 808 KNBR, 415-808-5627. We got Kyle Haar. We've got Raf Corral in the Daly City studios. It's great to be with you. And again, we're just getting started here. One more hour of this program, and then we'll be back tonight with Dubs OT after the Warriors take on the Lakers down in L.A. No Steph for the Dubs in that one. Luka's out. He got hurt the other night in the Lakers' most recent game. And, of course, no Jimmy Butler for the Warriors as he is out for the season and set to have ACL repair surgery coming up on Monday. The news of the morning, the Warriors looking to obviously convert Pat Spencer to a full NBA contract. He has played his full allotment of 50 games as a two-way player, and so that to be done here coming up before the Warriors hit the floor tonight in LA. And then the report from Jake Fisher and Mark Stein that the Warriors have interest in Lonzo Ball in the buyout market as he ended up getting shipped to Utah, I believe. And then Utah's going to buy him out. And so he's somebody that the Warriors could sign. So not going to sit on that open roster spot for too long, it looks like. And I kind of wondered whether the Warriors would do that in the aftermath of the Porzingis trade. And they obviously freed up a roster spot there. But then it sent Trace Jackson-Davis out to Toronto, which freed up another roster spot for the Dubs to be able to look to add. We're also talking existential, big picture questions and topics today as it relates to the Warriors striking out on Giannis, the inaction of the front office here, which has burned the Warriors holding on to the cards for too long, as it was said in the YouTube chat. And where do they go from here? Because they don't want to tank and they don't want to trade Steph. Like, those two things are off the table at this point. So I think the question becomes, what moves are available to be made in the offseason? And my God, they have got to stop. They have got to stop with the Giannis thing in the summer. Thinking that they can get back into the mix and have a shot if he winds up being back on the market come June and come July. All right, let's get to some of the chats here to open up the second hour. We always appreciate everybody. It's the best YouTube chat in sports, Just Dubs and Dubs OT. So here is what we've got coming back, and Kyle, I'll let you run them. I know I've been a little more active with my new ability to click on the never really believed in the Giannis deal, says Gene. The biggest miss is probably Jaren Jackson. I wholeheartedly agree. I think that is the one that was more attainable, and maybe Utah comes in and blows the Jazz or blows the Grizzlies out of the water by offering that third pick, and it ends up being a deal that the Warriors wouldn't have wanted to match, because we've talked about how the Warriors – wait a minute. It's 4 picks in one swap for Giannis, but it's 3 picks now for Jaren Jackson. The prices in the Warriors' mind don't equate, but there comes a point, if you want to get better, you have to risk a little bit more than maybe the value chart says that you're going to have to risk to be able to get somebody to come and join your program. But I know, Gene, you were adamant about it. And unfortunately, the Warriors being in on it for as long as they were. And it's interesting. I'm not giving them credit for this, Kyle, but it was interesting that they, as was reported, basically pivoted. They pivoted early. So I think there was a looking around at the market and seeing, Jaren Jackson Jr.'s gone, and other players that the Warriors had been linked to are off the board. So we got to tap out of this thing, because we really don't, at some point Wednesday night, they decided, all right, the Bucks aren't moving him, or the Bucks are at least not sending him to us. So we got to do something. Otherwise, it might have even been. Otherwise, Jonathan Kuminga might still be on the team at this point, and that truly would have been, in my mind, the worst case scenario where they're basically giving him minutes now, miserable as he would be to be remaining on the Warriors squad. Let's keep it rolling from Gene to Ian J. My question is, how can the team improve if Porzingis walks? It's back to Jimmy and Draymond as the only trade pieces. Well, Porzingis could be signed and traded, and put with other contracts. So but again, Porzingis is on track to make less, obviously, than the 30.7, I believe, that he's on the books for this season. But when you look at the Warriors' salaries here, and it is that they did lose some flexibility with the Kuminga slot and the Buddy Hield slot turning into the Porzingis slot at 30.7. And you look at next year, it's Jimmy 56.8, it's Draymond 27.6, it's Moody 12.5, and so Moody would be somebody that potentially could be moved on from. Horford has a player option for $6 million, so if he comes back next year, that would be somebody that could get maybe thrown in a deal. But yeah, the salary slots are not necessarily there, but you can do a sign and trade, and you can put Porzingis in a sign and trade with others, although it's going to create another hard cap situation for the Warriors, as early as the summer if they look to do it. So to me, though, I don't necessarily think, Ian, that it's about a star per se. But to me, it has to be that next tier. Can you get into the Trey Murphy? Because Trey Murphy's, to me, it's the Trey Murphys and the Michael Porters. And, Porter probably makes too much now, honestly, because I don't think you'd want to move Draymond for Michael Porter. Because, again, he's up north of the mid to upper 30s in terms of his salary. But, it's what can you get for some of your draft capital. Again, Murphy, I think in his own right, is kind of a pipe dream because he's developing into a hell of a player and not just a 3-and-D shooter. He's actually, because the Pelicans have been so bad and they've asked him to do more, he's actually leveled up and worked on his game. Now, again, losing team, but he's actually been somebody that's become a real force in terms of attacking the basket and pull-up game. And he's just gotten better in terms of his lead dog game. But yes, the Porzingis sign and trade is part of it. Or you bring Porzingis back. I mentioned on Thursday, and I should probably reiterate, the Warriors do have a much better chance to be able to bring back DeAnthony Melton now, because they'll be able to easily get under the tax to be able to open up the non-taxpayer mid-level exception gets opened. And so that means that they can start Melton right around $15 million and give him some raises moving forward. So that they can do that up to a 4-year deal. So they can bring Melton back. But again, you can bring Melton back, you can bring Horford back, you can bring Porzingis back. The question is a fair one. How do they improve? How do they get that one more piece? Because to me, that is the goal now. Is it? Again, don't end the stream here, Kyle. Is it LeBron? Do they think because LeBron is not going to be somebody that's going to require a massive deal next year, one would think, if LeBron does choose to play. I know his name has been mentioned with, obviously, Cleveland. I think New York and the Warriors are the 3 teams that weren't going to get him at the deadline. He wasn't going to be traded at the deadline, but he is going to be a free agent, and I don't think he's going to be back with LA next year. So, yeah, Bay Jedi 21, what's your take on LeBron if he wants to come play with Steph? I say LeBron doesn't put Golden State in contention. Man, if you could get LeBron on a vet min I mean, and again, he would have to be willing to do that, but he doesn't need the money. I mean, that is sort of again, on its own level of a pipe dream, right? I mean, and you've got LeBron, who's 41 now, and going to be 42 in December of this year. So basically he would play next year, the back half of next year at 42 years old. But I don't know, LeBron, if you're telling me LeBron and you keep Melton and you keep Horford and you keep Porzingis and LeBron comes and you're waiting for Jimmy, I don't know. I kind of think that team could contend if they were healthy. What do you think, Kyle? I think that team, LeBron until you get Jimmy back and then you have them both. I mean, maybe you lack some shooting when you're playing both of them, and it would be tough to have Draymond. It would be tough to have Draymond on the floor maybe with LeBron. Although LeBron's become a capable enough shooter at this point, and he can do everything else. But I don't know. I think if you're telling me LeBron on a minimum, Melton comes back, Horford comes back, Porzingis comes back, and then Jimmy comes back in January, February. I don't know. I think that actually is good enough to put you back in the mix of, at least getting to the second round, if not the conference finals, if not everything goes right, the finals, even though you're not getting any younger at that point.
Right. I think you would be good enough to get a top 6 seed and then good enough to look at the trade deadline next season and be like, well, what do we need? Well, we obviously need shooting, but then maybe this is pivoting back to the frustrations of this trade deadline and getting someone like a Michael Porter Jr. Then, I mean, that would have fit in with, I think, that group, a guy that can work off the ball and just kind of a catch and shoot guy with some length. But I mean, obviously with that lineup, you're getting older, and with Draymond, Butler, and LeBron, you don't have the best shooters out there, but you're back into that territory where you're probably a move away from being in contention.
Yeah, I think that would, as a stopgap, again, you're not getting younger, but I think that could do it. That and the right amount of other role players, if they all fit together appropriately, I think that could be an option. But again, it's like, does LeBron really want to come to the Bay? Maybe. Does he want to play the 1 year with Steph? Maybe they both try to get their fifth together, because I don't think the Lakers are going to win the title this year. So, I mean, LeBron's going to be stuck on 4. We know Steph at the end of this season is going to be stuck on 4 and having to try to get the fifth one another year. But it does set up to me that last dance kind of an option, which I don't think is nothing. Let's keep it rolling here in the chat. Bees Knees, I think we are underestimating what the Warriors could potentially turn Butler's expiring contract into over the summer, plus picks. That is the other question. And you're right, it has been underestimated, at least for the purposes of this show. Jimmy Butler's making $56.8 million next year. And they have indicated to him that they are behind him and not going to move him, at least weren't at the deadline. Would that change? If the right opportunity presented itself? What would the right opportunity be, though? Because I know, I saw floated out, what if you did Jimmy, and this was before the deadline, what if you did Jimmy and you sent him somewhere, but you did Jimmy and 4 picks and you get Trey Murphy and Zion, like that kind of thing. Like you get off, the Pelicans want to get off of Zion and you get Trey Murphy, and then you maybe make it a bigger deal. And but to do that, you're paying, again, you could make the case on the value chart that taking Zion from the Pelicans means you shouldn't have to give up 4 picks, but you also are getting somebody that's exceptional in Trey Murphy who really fits, but then you don't have Jimmy. So would that move the needle? Because the other thing is, as it relates to Jimmy, and I've given the Warriors maybe the benefit of the doubt on this, and maybe wrongfully, is that they seem to really believe that Jimmy's going to be able to come back and, like, at 37, the ACL is not going to be a thing. And the reality is we don't know that it's not going to be a thing. And I get it. The ACL is not what the ACL injury used to be. It's, I think, a little different in the NBA than maybe it is in the NFL when guys come back and aren't the same. I think more in the NFL. But, and even just Dunleavy talking about it at the podium after Jimmy went down, going back here within the last couple of weeks before the Warriors went on that road trip at the end of January. I mean, he really was matter of fact about the belief that, yeah, I mean, it's an injury that, he'll get surgery and he'll be able to come back and we'll be waiting for him. So, are the Warriors really believe that? Is that thinking too pie in the sky, right? Is the belief that they're going to get Jimmy off an ACL at 37 to play the final 30 games the way that he played the final 30 games, last year, which will be 2 years at the time in which Jimmy comes back. Is that something that would be, can you count on that? And to me, it's a coin flip. Can you count on it? I don't think you should count on it. Could it work out? Maybe. I don't know. But you're right. I think, are the Warriors posturing there? And who would the players be? I think is the other part of the equation now. If B's knees were underestimating what the Warriors would potentially turn his contract into, what would the players be? Because that is a $56.8 million contract for next year. So you would be talking premium players or players that have been disappointments in other spots. We're not talking about Giannis with that, not anymore. But where are you at on that?
I mean, I think it would have to be either like 2 players like a Trey Murphy or a Zion or one premium player. I know like Kawhi, since the Clippers got rid of Harden and got rid of Zubac.
Good name.
That Kawhi's name was floating around during the trade deadline. But I think it would be irresponsible for the front office to think, yeah, we're just going to get the same Jimmy Butler that we've been getting for, I guess, if you combine last season and the first half of this season, for if you get that same kind of player that you've been getting. And then I think it's irresponsible to think, well, he's also going to play all 30 games, because we know how the coaching staff has treated players coming off of ACL because of Melton, who's come off an ACL. Butler's going to be probably on a minutes restriction and not going to be playing back-to-back. So then you have to look at the value of Jimmy Butler and what you're getting from him post-injury.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, Jimmy won't play back-to-backs in all likelihood over the final, let's just call it 31, since it was 31. It was 31 after the deadline last year. It was 31 after the deadline if you go back to Thursday's game against Phoenix. Rick Celebrini needs to ask for a big raise because he'll be earning it this offseason, 100% on that. So it is interesting to look at, Jimmy. How do you build a team that's good enough to offset not having Jimmy for the first 3-4 months of the season, but then also the fact that, let's say, of the final 30 games, he's probably going to only be able to play, 23 to 25 of them if he's fully healthy and doesn't have any setbacks. And and everything rolls along the lines of the recovery that everybody's hoping for, and not necessarily the recovery of the reality. So it is going to be interesting to see, because you could say, hey, bring Porzingis back, and him and Horford can split the back-to-backs. I'll bet that's how they end up playing it here between now and the end of the regular season. Melton is somebody that you would want to bring him back, but keep him healthy and not continue to play him in back-to-backs. Although he is still a younger player, and I think the Warriors feel good about where he's been at this point. So it's just tricky. It's just the Warriors have found themselves in this tricky spot where they want to be, they're forced in many ways to go older. They haven't gone younger, and it just adds to the layers of the way you have to build the roster to be able to maximize it for the regular season, for if you're waiting on Jimmy. Yeah, I do think they are going to have to take a hard look at just saying, you know what, we might have to move Jimmy. And Kawhi's interesting. The Kawhi came up $50 million next year, a little over $50 million for Kawhi next year. The one thing about Kawhi, he's a free agent after next year. So it's expiring for expiring at that point. So it's like, why would you, if you're an expiring, why would you, if you're the Clippers, flip Kawhi for Jimmy? Because you could just have Kawhi and it's the same purpose. Like a team that would want Jimmy would be, and maybe it's a team that would want Jimmy would be trying to get off of a bad contract. And so he would probably in that instance have to go elsewhere, and it would become maybe a salary dump moving into a rebuild kind of a thing for the Clippers. But again, as we saw going back to the summer of 2024, the Clippers aren't necessarily inclined to be looking to help the Warriors by giving the Warriors the best remaining player that they have on the roster, and a guy who's been a Finals MVP a couple of times back in the day.
I think the other thing to think about is if the Warriors kind of run it back and maybe they make a smaller addition. I mean, where would their record be when Jimmy does come back? Because if they're still kind of staring at like the 8 or 9 seed and staring at the play-in before Jimmy comes back, and then you add Jimmy, well then it's like, I mean, do you have enough talent to make a top 6 push, right? So I think that's another thing to think about for the Warriors.
Yeah, and Diggum brings up a good point too. Does it look bad to players in the NBA if you trade players when they get hurt? They did it with Melton. I mean, they did it with Melton, and Melton still came back. So he obviously understood and liked his time. And I think Melton probably, hey, I didn't get a chance to really be a part of this thing last year, so I want to give the chance for this year that I didn't get last year. So he was willing to come back. But I do think that's an indicator that maybe guys are okay with it. I think everybody's different. Honestly, I think Melton was cool with it, but Jimmy, and I understand, like Jimmy, not even playing for the Warriors for a full year. I can understand where the Warriors would look at Jimmy and think, my God, like he was awesome for this team. Over the year. And I can understand where there would be a reluctance in the immediate aftermath of the trade to be like, yeah, thanks, Jimmy. See ya. Like it's just a lot, right? It's a lot to process. And maybe that would be viewed, given everything Jimmy brought to this team that the Warriors desperately needed for the last year, that would be a little bit maybe disrespectful. And something that you wouldn't want to have the rest of the league be on notice, that you're just willing to do. But so that was kind of my first thought, like, damn, it would be really hard to move Jimmy given everything he's brought, but the business is the business. And if you have the opportunity, like in my mind, it was, if you have the opportunity to get Giannis, then sorry, Jimmy, you gotta do it, at that point. So maybe, and again, I'm not saying for Giannis specifically, because we're tabling that conversation here after today until the summer, unless something comes up. So But I think in the summer they are going to have to be more open to having a conversation with Jimmy about the fact that they may have to look to be able to try to bring somebody else in. But are you less inclined to do that if you're more of the belief once you get into the summer that the rehab's going well and he is going to be coming back? Like, that's also something worth monitoring, right? If the rehab's going well and you think that he is going to be a capable player, then maybe at that point you look to just keep him. If the rehab's not going well, and again, the Warriors will have intimate knowledge of that, that other teams won't. Not saying that you would look to, snooker a team, to fleece a team on an injury, but they would, at that point, the value of the expiring contract would be more, even for an injured player that obviously at that point would have their career future be in jeopardy beyond next year if the rehab doesn't go well. So something to monitor. Again, everything matters as you head toward the end of this season and on into the summer. All right, let's take a timeout. 808 KMBR, 415-808-5627. We'll come back, more chats, and we will wrap things up here for the Just Dubs portion of the day as we keep this thing going for another half hour, and then we'll reconvene with Dubs OT tonight after the Warriors take on the Lakers down in L.A. So we'll talk about it next, more right here on The Sports Leader.
KNBR, The Sports Leader. Dub Nation, this is the real and inside story on Warriors basketball. Just Dubs with John Dickinson now continues, streaming live at twitch.tv/thesportsleader.
All right, welcome back. Final segment. We'll go about another 20 minutes here as we get closer until noon. It is Just Dubs. And back tonight, Dubs OT again, right around 8 o'clock. Warriors and the Lakers. Man, the injuries across the NBA. I promise Kyle get on a rant with this, but no Steph, no Jimmy, no Luka tonight in what, the night before the Super Bowl is always a premium NBA night, going back to the ABC Saturday Night Showcase, and I mean really for the last 20 years. The night before the Super Bowl, the week in between the championship games and the Super Bowl, like those are typically historically premium level games, and to have a Warrior Laker game with no Steph and no Luka and no Jimmy, it's just a bummer, man. Like, as we separate for a moment on the trade deadline and the disappointment and the frustration and what's left for the Warriors. By the way, looks like they're interested in signing Lonzo Ball to a post buyout contract in addition to converting Pat Spencer. That's kind of the news of the morning, but it's just a bummer, man, because we don't know how many games, and the Warriors and Lakers play still 3 more times this year. They played, obviously, going back to what was opening night, and then they wind up playing tonight in LA, and then they play at Chase a couple of times. But yeah, imagine paying $3,000 for seats to watch tonight's game. And tonight's is down in LA, but we've seen it happen at Chase before, Urquidy's family. So yeah, that's tough, man. It's tough. And they play again here in 3 weeks at Chase on another one of these Saturday night showcases, and then another game in April toward the end of the year. But there's only so many Steph LeBron matchups. I mean, any one at this point could be the last. I think it's pretty clear LeBron may not come back next year, although at least he's leaving the door open to not coming back. I think he probably will do one more year, but we don't know. So we could be, watching the end here of LeBron. But I mean, it could be down to now, if you strike tonight out, 2 more opportunities to see LeBron go against Steph.
And then you even go back for the last few games. Suns, no Booker, no Steph. 76ers, no Embiid, no Steph. And then the Timberwolves are like, oh, you're resting Steph and Draymond too, right?
You're resting everybody. We'll give Ant the night off.
Well, and you don't need to play either. but yeah, the NBA. I mean, I was talking to a buddy. He was like, dude, yeah, with the NBA and like the load management thing. I mean, the ratings are just in the tank. So I do think something needs to change. I mean, we'll see if anything does. But I mean, yeah, it's just been kind of a brutal watch with no stars. But shout out Pat Spencer. And I do,
shout out Pat Spencer, who might have been the best player on the floor for the Warriors on Thursday in Phoenix, and a miraculous win, which we haven't really talked about. We did spend the first half hour, 45 minutes of Dubs OT on Thursday, which is obviously what that's about. But every win, and I've said it, I mean, every win I think should continue to keep this team fighting for more. And we'll see on Porzingis and what he can bring. Again, in the short term, if he's healthy, I think he can be a really productive player in ways that the Warriors need. A 7-footer that can protect the rim. And I mean, my goodness, I was watching 2 years ago Porzingis with Boston. I watched like a 2.5 minute clip of just him blocking shots. It was basically almost a 3-minute montage of all of his blocks from 2 years ago with Boston. I mean, he was an unbelievable defensive force for them. And then he can step out and hit the 3 ball. I know Draymond was talking about the mismatches, right? He's somebody that that can take advantage of a mismatch, shoot over the top. You could post him up a little bit. So he certainly isn't going to be replacing Jimmy, and he definitely can't even replace Jimmy a little bit if, he isn't going to be on the floor himself. But it does sound like he's going to be able to play soon. His ability to give this team a small lift between now and the end of the year, though, doesn't change the big picture frustration about the hoarding of the draft picks, the draft misses, because here's the other thing. It's hard to put a positive short-term spin on the way the trade deadline played out. It's more, to me, also the fact, Kyle, that the 2-timeline plan now is a failure. It is an official failure. Wiseman, not an NBA player. Kuminga may go on to be a very good player. I'm not discounting his ability to be able to do that, but obviously it's not going to be, and it never was going to be with the Warriors. Their bungling of not moving Kuminga 2 years ago, when they had opportunities to maybe move him in draft capital for an OG Anunoby, for a Pascal Siakam. We know all the reports for Caruso, when they could have traded him for Caruso, and then Giddey winds up getting traded for Caruso, and he helps the Thunder go on to win a championship. Giddey, who was drafted the pick before Kuminga, going back to 21. It's choosing Kuminga over Wagner when Steve Kerr would have preferred, and I'm sure he wasn't alone, would have preferred Franz Wagner at that point. It's, Moses Moody, who's fine as a player, solid, but not Trey Murphy III or even Alperen Şengün, but they didn't take Şengün because they still had Wiseman, and then they just thought Moses Moody was the better option instead of Trey Murphy III. And who knows? I know it always, anytime you bring up some of those players, people say, well, would they have developed in the Warriors system the way that maybe they have with Şengün in Houston or Trey with the Pelicans? I think good players are good players, and I think those players would have been fine. But again, the Warriors just found themselves in this spot where, Wiseman failure, Kuminga for the Warriors is a failure. He's not necessarily a failure in terms of his career. That story is still to be written by JK, but it's Moody's nice, but just a role player, maybe a fringe starter, but a role player. So the 2-timeline plan was just a failure. And, that is a tough pill to swallow, regardless of Porzingis coming in and down the stretch here, get to 43 wins instead of 39, or whatever it's ultimately going to be. So can he stay healthy? That's obviously the big thing. And what does it leave the Warriors set up for in the summer? Again, would they look to move Jimmy's contract at 56.8? Would they look to move Draymond? Because, that's another thing we haven't talked about, Kyle, was, the Warriors did include Draymond in the offer for Giannis. Now that they've kind of ripped that Band-Aid off when they hadn't ripped that Band-Aid off before, I wonder if the Warriors would be more willing to include Draymond in other deals now that they've ripped the Band-Aid off and thrown him in the one in an attempt to try and improve the team. There is a pathway to keep DeAnthony Melton now, which I think is a good thing. They can get under the tax. They can offer him, again, what would amount to a 4-year, somewhere between $65 and $70 million contract. Again, that's the high end. They don't have that. That would be, they can offer him up to that by using their non-taxpayer mid-level. Do you keep Porzingis or not? You like Guy Santos. You want to keep him. I'll tell you one more thing, and then we'll wrap this up with chats and close up shop here in the final 10 minutes. And tonight is, today is not maybe the day to make the full examination of what this is going to look like. But Brandon Podziemski's an extension eligible player this offseason. And, he is obviously a very polarizing player, and we'll see what happens between now and the end of the season. But Podziemski is probably going to be somebody that's going to want 480, probably close. He's probably going to want close to 100. And, that I don't think that number on paper is going to, I'd love you. I could see the look on your face already. Like, I just don't think that's not going to move the needle for Warrior fans. But the problem is he is a more difficult player to trade right now. And in this offseason, it won't change this offseason because the contract extension wouldn't kick in until the following year, wouldn't kick in until 27, 28, even though it would be agreed to this offseason. But the problem is, Kyle, he still is only a $5.6 million salary for next year. So he is more difficult to trade because he makes less money than, say, if he made 20 or 25, and then that 20 or 25 could be aggregated in trades with other players to try to bring somebody back. So they're kind of stuck with him. And then what do you want to make that number for 27, 28? And do the Warriors want to lock him in? Because they've been reluctant to lock anybody in post 2027. That would be really, other than Moses Moody and his 12.5 million or 13.4 million. Right now, only Moody is on the books for 2027-28. Moody and I think a partial guarantee for Will Richard at 2.5. So the Warriors have, I'm looking at it right now, the Warriors have $16 million on the books for 27-28, and the two players that have it are Moody and Richard.
All right, perfect. Yeah. No, I like Pods. I mean,
yeah, let's go back to Pods.
I can't like justify myself or the Warriors front office giving him north of 20 mil a year. I think it's a good deal if he gets the Moody contract, which was 3 for 33, around there. Like 11 mil a year sounds closer for me. I think he probably has a little bit more upside than Moody, but also hasn't proven, like Jake hasn't proven much to me. Like, he could be a solid role player and connector, but as a carrier, he's not that but I think it is up to the Warriors to decide if they want him to be part of their future plans.
Well, we'll get some clicks here, and I'll run through a couple of these. Bee's Knees, is it a formality Pods gets extended? I don't think it's a formality if they don't want to add money to the books right now for 27, 28. Maybe they want to let this offseason play out first. But again, the deadline for that is going to be, I think, October. So they could play out the whole season, the whole offseason this year, and then determine before October whether they want to look to give Pods the extension. I think it's going to be 480. I really do. I think that's almost it feels like that's almost the minimum. I don't think it's a formality, though. No Cap chiming in. No Cap. Kerr will make sure Pods gets an extension. Yeah, I mean, Pods gets 15 to 18 million. If not, you ship him out. LM, again, dig him. You cannot give him 80. You just can't. So, I mean, it's probably going to be around 80, I would imagine. And again, I think that's a number that makes everybody just gulp. Like, oh my God, like what is the deal on that? So we shall see. But again, the frustrating part, it's not so much, I actually would be fine with Pods making 20 million, because then if he was making 20 million this year, because then you could throw him into a trade as a young prospect that has some salary matching, value. So I actually don't think that would be the worst thing in the world. The problem, though, is if you sign him to that deal and then you wind up a year from now even more disappointed in him than maybe you are now, you've already signed him to that deal. But no, to go back to B's knees, is it a formality? I don't think it's a formality because of the reluctance that the Warriors have put on, wanting to add salary for beyond 2027. And this would be another relatively significant step toward doing that. All right, Kyle, you've got control here for the last 5 minutes of the clicks, 80 for 15 years. B's knees chiming in. Let's just run through the chat the best we can here to close up shop. JD, I think Lacob acting all arrogant in the past, and Kerr's coaching style turn players off from wanting to come here. I do think it's interesting. I goes back for me to KD. Like I think KD didn't by the end appreciate his time with the Warriors, and I think other star players have started to feel a certain way about the Warriors since then because of that. And I think it has made it less of a destination. How messy it got at the end with KD, I think, is in part made it less of a destination for the Warriors. Lacob being arrogant, I mean, that's kind of in its own category. And look, people have written about it, and we touched on it a little bit the other night. It's this belief that, I wouldn't necessarily go as far as to say that Lacob's been more focused on Giannis than he's been on Steph over the last few years, or more focused on Kuminga than he has. But like, I think that's probably a bit too far. But the reality is, I think they have not been aggressive enough or creative enough in trying to maximize the end of this Steph run. That's just a fair criticism. And you look at the fact that they've preached patience, and they've said they want to continue to have optionality, but as you mentioned earlier, they kick the can down the road. They kick the can down the road. They kick the can down the road. They kick the can down the road, and then they don't wind up doing anything of significance unless it feels like that move falls in their lap, a la Jimmy Butler. And I'll even say the Wiggins deal in some way fell in their lap, because let's not forget the Warriors got a pick for taking on Wiggins that turned into Kuminga. It wasn't as if the Warriors traded D'Angelo Russell and a pick. They probably should have needed to have traded a pick. They probably should have been the team that sent a first for D'Lo, or I'm sorry, for Wiggins and D'Lo to go out. But they were able to do it the opposite way, and that winds up being a boom for the Warriors. The fact that they were able to get that pick. Now, what do they turn that pick into? Well, now it's Kristaps Porzingis, unfortunately, for Golden State at 30 years old with some health and obviously knee issues, and Achilles issues, and he's had the knee before. So Ian J, sounds like the Giants. JD, what's the what's the comparison there? What's the context there, Kyle?
I think going back to like the frustrations of the trade deadline, here's this big shiny player in Giannis, and you tease us with the Giannis and then settle for Porzingis.
Yeah, I think that's the inability to be closers. I think is probably that's it. And Raf's nodding his head. It's the inability to be closers, I think. And also a little bit of, hanging on to the past, in some ways that maybe they could have moved on from. But again, I understand why the Giants did it for maybe not quite as long as they did, but I understand why the Giants did it at least initially. But it's the commitment to Steph and getting him the big ticket item to help him try to get 5. One quick one I'll throw in. Hey, Beerman, has Dunleavy had a post-draft deadline or post-trade deadline press conference? To my knowledge, no, he did not even meet with reporters. He didn't meet with reporters in Phoenix on Thursday. I haven't seen anything this morning. Warriors don't have a shoot-around for a 5:30 game, so there wouldn't be an opportunity. I know last year in LA last year, it was, Jimmy and Dunleavy, and it all happened actually at Crypto.com Arena. Remember, we were down there for that. So I think that's probably, if it doesn't happen tonight, for the reporters that are on hand in LA. It probably will happen before the game on Monday when the Warriors take on the Grizzlies. All right, that's going to do it. Big thanks to everybody. One more. They could have got Porzingis for Poole, but they didn't want the extra year of salary, so Boston got him and won a chip. Yeah, I mean, that's and again, they wouldn't trade Kuminga for Caruso, and he ended up helping OKC win a chip. Again, I was always of the belief that they were going to have to trade Kuminga for the right role player, and nobody wanted to believe me, although there were times they could have got OG Anunoby or Siakam, who I think are pretty high-end role players at that. All right, big thanks to Raph. Big thanks to Kyle. Big thanks to everybody in the chat, those who called, those who texted. We're back tonight, 8 o'clock, right after the Warriors and the Lakers from LA. We'll talk to you then right here. Just Dubs on the Sports Leader.